Today's podcast of Hellbent for Horror is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Hellbent for Horror. Audible has over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Hi, and welcome to Hellbent for Horror, a podcast devoted to all things related to horror. I'm S.A. Bradley, and I'm a lifelong movie lover, but my heart belongs to horror. My biggest thrill, however, is getting to talk to people about this stuff. I really want to start conversations with you. Before I jump into the show today, I wanted to give warm thanks to the folks out there who decided to support Hellbent for Horror through my Patreon site. If you don't know, Patreon is a crowdfunding site for people to support creators of all sorts of work. You can support the show by pledging a set amount for each episode I release. If I don't put out an episode, you don't get charged. And with that, I want to give warm thanks to Janelle Coley, who became my first patron a few days after I launched the page. Janelle, thanks so much for the support and your excitement about listening to future episodes. Your digital art will be coming to you soon, and your brain is now on the short list for inclusion in the new creature I'm building in the garage. I also want to thank Ian Carruthers for his support for the show. Ian, your support is greatly appreciated. And now you can consider yourself an accomplice in my crimes moving forward. Yes, membership has its privileges. If you like Hellbent for Horror and you feel inspired to contribute even as little as $1, it'll really help me continue to devote my time and my effort to the show. And I've also got a book version of Hellbent for Horror in the works, and I'll be posting some of that work in progress on the Patreon site. I'll be interested in hearing your opinions. I've set up different support levels on my site, and there are little tokens of thanks at each of the levels, from access to Patreon activity feeds, to monthly web hangouts where we can talk directly about horror, to limited edition Hellbent for Horror t-shirts. Black only. I mean, you guys are horror fans, right? You can find my page at patreon.com, and then just search for Hellbent for Horror. And I'll also have a direct link to it on my website. Also, there's all kinds of ways to support the show. You can just write reviews of the show on iTunes and Stitcher. That helps get the word out to other horror fans and lets us grow. Thanks a lot, everybody, for your support. So, being the guy that I am, I get asked one question more than any other. Why horror? Why are you so into horror? Hey, it's a valid enough question because if you're not a horror fan, it's a weird thing to devote so much time and energy to. What I can say is that horror satisfies some desire inside me which I can't quite articulate, and it doesn't just manifest itself with watching movies or reading books. It ignites a creative energy in me, and I actively try to immerse myself by being creative. I don't want to just be a spectator. I want to be involved in this object of my desire. My love for horror is active, not passive. And yes, I'll admit that makes me obsessive. I consider it a healthy obsession, of course. But if we're all being honest here, everyone has an obsession, even if they don't see it. It might be a passion for reading, and you buy more books than there are hours to read them. And before you finish all those books, you buy some more, because those look good to read too. Or maybe you're into football and baseball. Sure, you watch all the games during the season, you listen to all the sports radio, but maybe you even watch the NFL draft, all of it, or you watch spring training games, all of them. And while you do, you wear your team jersey. How many jackets do you own that have your team's logo on them? Be honest. Perhaps your obsession is music. You love a band so much that you never miss a concert when they're in town. Or maybe you don't miss them if they're playing within 100 miles of you. Or perhaps you've planned a vacation trip to a city you always wanted to visit anyway, and it just so happens that your favorite band is on tour there at the time. And while you're on that trip, you meet fans you talk with on the band's unofficial fan page. Have you ever made an unofficial fan page for your favorite band? Or maybe you like beer so much, you create your own microbrew, for you and your friends. And then you start making personalized labels, and you make your own logo, and then you go to meetups, and then you start entering competitions. and suddenly half of your yard is a dirt mound used for growing hops. We are all in special interest groups, and I'm not making fun of it, I'm celebrating it. What other kind of interest is there worth having other than special? Average interest? Standard interest? I want to be around people who have a passion for something in this world. And I bring all of this up to show how we all have our geek side to us. We find something that goes beyond giving us simple pleasure, and we stick to it. And that compels us to seek out more of that good stuff. That brings us to desire. That brings us to obsession. Now, this level of obsession is relatively harmless, although it can mess up your free time and your backyard. But hey, you're the one who bears the brunt of any damage that your obsession might bring. A documentary that examines that level of obsession very well is Michael Stevenson's American Scream. It's about home haunters in a town in Massachusetts and their obsessive love of Halloween. In case you don't know, home haunters are the folks who decorate way beyond normal. They turn their homes into a dark ride for one night, Halloween. And Victor Baratow is the obsessive king of the home haunters in this town. He's so into Halloween that he picked the house his family lives in because it was on a great street for trick-or-treating. He's the guy who obsesses over every detail and works on elaborate decorations all year long. As Halloween approaches, he overstresses himself and he drives his friends and his family crazy. He's also the only one who makes something truly, dare I say, artistic. His hard work makes beautiful scares and brings him praise from the long lines of neighbors that come out to see him. Why go through all this work? Well, we find out that Victor didn't celebrate holidays and birthdays when he was growing up. And that left a void. So his obsession comes from something very personal. And that personal need to reclaim what was lost drives him to create, not just to celebrate. He might get prickly in October, but when Halloween finally comes, he turns back into being a lovable teddy bear and a grateful family man. He's exorcised that demon. And that's a healthy way to use an obsession. Even at his grumpiest, Victor Baratow never crosses any lines or burns any bridges or mistreats his family. But there is a line that can get crossed. And it does get crossed. There are people in the world to whom the obsession can be so all-encompassing. It's no longer just idiosyncratic. It becomes inseparable from their personality. And at that point, it's not obsession anymore. It's something else entirely. A delusion, a mania, a psychosis. And at this level, the damage doesn't just affect the obsessed person. These people take hostages. There's an old Far Side cartoon that has a picture of a blowfish with its spikes out and a rattlesnake using its rattle and a hissing cat. The last picture is a guy on a street corner wearing a raincoat with a shoe on his head for a hat and a swimming pool inner tube around his waist, and he holds a bazooka. The heading on this cartoon is, "How Nature Says Do Not Touch." If only it was always that simple. If only it was always that obvious. There are people for whom the obsessive thought is like a drink for an alcoholic. They just don't seem to be able to flip that switch that says, okay, enough is enough. Maybe they don't even have the switch. But just like many alcoholics, they seem relatively normal in everyday life. You've probably all had a situation like this. You go to a conference or you go to a political rally. Everyone there is deeply invested in whatever it is you're there to support. Everything is going fine, and then you start talking to someone and you connect. You're both completely in agreement. And that person is even complimentary of how you think. And then they feel comfortable enough with you to confide a few things. And that's when the crazy comes out. You excuse yourself and you get the hell out of there, but the encounter still shakes you. I did not see that coming. Why didn't I see that coming? Why? Because most of the time, crazy has the best camouflage. And that brings me to a movie that I'm sure started with good intentions. And I'm sure it sounded like an inspired idea to those who came to work on it. It was certainly very personal. I'm sure the participants thought they were bringing a positive message to the world. I'm sure they thought this movie would have social impact on its subject matter. I'm sure they thought it would legitimize their lifestyle. Wow, did they get it wrong. The movie is Roar, which was completed in 1981 after a decade of production. The movie never played in U.S. theaters. Just recently, it was finally released on Blu-ray. It stars Tippi Hedren and her husband at the time, Noel Marshall, and their kids, including a teenage Melanie Griffith, and 150 lions. 150 real lions. 150 real untamed lions and tigers and black panthers and cheetahs and even a few bull elephants, all roaming free. Not just roaming free outside, but also free to move through the family's 3-story house, and not an animal trainer in sight. What could possibly go wrong, right? Would you be surprised to hear that there were 72 animal attacks on the cast and crew? Would you be surprised to hear that many of those attacks are still included in the film? The blood you see is real. Noel Marshall, the director and the star, was mauled so many times he contracted gangrene. He gets his hand bitten clean through in the movie, and it's in the final cut. Tippi Hedren broke her leg getting thrown by an elephant, and the shot is in the final cut. Melanie Griffith was attacked twice. Once, she was pinned to the ground while a lion pulled her head back by the hair, and that shot is in the film. In the second attack, her face was mauled, and she needed 100 stitches and plastic surgery. That one wasn't included in the movie. Jan de Bont, the director of photography, was scalped by a lion, and he needed 200 stitches to put his head back together. The assistant director had his throat and his jaw bitten open, and his ear was nearly ripped off. And John Marshall, the son of the director, had a lion clamp its jaws around his head. It took 6 men 25 minutes to get him free and 56 stitches to close the wounds. This movie was intended to be a love letter to animal conservation. After watching Roar, my response to that is, holy shit. This is one of the most wrong-headed movies ever made, right up there with D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation and Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will. I guarantee you that the makers of Roar never expected their movie to be mentioned in the same breath with those two movies, but I think it's appropriate. This movie isn't a love letter to animal conservation. It's a suicide note. So how does a movie like this ever get made? How could anyone think this was a good idea? Well, here's some quick context. In the 1970s, there were a lot of movies about modern man getting back to nature. Most of them were very family-friendly, like The Adventures of the Wilderness Family and Mountain Family Robinson, both G-rated. And there was the TV series Gentle Ben, and it starred a boy and his brown bear. But the granddaddy of them all was Born Free. In that movie, a game warden and his wife raised an orphaned lion cub named Elsa. The entire world fell in love with watching Elsa grow up. This movie single-handedly changed a generation's perception of lions. And it was a big hit, and it even had a hit theme song. So, Noel Marshall and Tippi Hedren were animal lovers who went on safari to Africa. And while they were there, they saw an abandoned game warden's house that was overrun by lions. And Noel looked at that and said, there's a visual image to start a movie on. Now, Noel Marshall was the executive producer of The Exorcist, so he had some sway, he had some power, and he was crazy as a loon. And thus started the perfect storm. Roar is an example of passion turning into obsession and then turning into delusion, a very, very dangerous delusion. Roar isn't a movie. It's the diary of a madman and the family he takes hostage. So what makes Roar so batshit crazy? Well, it's not just because it's intense and violent because of the unpredictability of the lions. It's also because the movie is so schizophrenic. Remember, these types of movies were generally kid films, very family-friendly. And at one level, Roar thinks that's the kind of movie it is. You can see this schizophrenia in the opening credits. There's happy music and shots of giraffes and zebras running free on the African plains. We are introduced to the stars of the movie, and it's the lions, and there's cutesy starring title cards. So we're introduced to Robbie, the Lion King of the Pride. And then we see Gary, Robbie's baby cub, who gives out a cute baby growl. And then we see Togar, who is the troublemaking rogue lion in the movie. And he's introduced to us covered in blood. There is blood and gore covering his mane and his muzzle. That's the opening credits, folks. Noel Marshall plays an animal researcher in Africa who lives amongst the animals he studies. In reality, the bulk of the movie is shot on Noel's private ranch in Acton, California. That's right, Noel had 150 untrained lions running around a ranch in L.A. County. Ah, the 70s. Once again, without any animal trainers. But back to the plot, such as it is. After 2 years of living in solitary research, Noel sends for his family to come visit him. However, he hasn't told them about the living accommodations. And because of a series of animal attack misadventures, literally, he isn't home when his exhausted family shows up at the front door. They have no idea that the home and the land, for as far as they can see, is full of lions and tigers. Hilarity ensues. Now, we have no idea what the original story for Roar might have been, because the direction the film takes is dictated by the actions of the untrained big cats. Jan de Bont rolled 5 cameras simultaneously, and he got the hell out of the way. And in all honesty, it doesn't matter. I could talk about this movie shot by shot, and it wouldn't spoil the film for you. Because it's not what happens, it's how it happens. And knowing that these are real lions and that people get hurt over and over makes it more intense. This may be the only movie in existence that gets scarier and more intense the more you know about it going in. Everybody in this movie looks scared shitless, except for Noel. He's running around in a whole different movie. He's got this big white guy afro that makes him look like a lion, and he's grinning his ass off. He's telling people, it's okay. If that lion wanted to kill you, he would have. One minute he's smiling and saying some inspirational platitude, and the next he's screaming at the top of his lungs and swinging his arms to stop a charging lion, all in the same shot. There's a scene early in the film where Noel tries to convince another actor to sit with him at the foot of a staircase that's covered with lions. The actor looks ready to jump out of his skin, and Noel tries to deliver some dialogue when suddenly 2 huge lions start fighting on the steps above them. By the way, I suggest you turn the volume way up on this movie if you watch it. The poor actor tries to get away, but now there are lions all over the floor in front of him. They are pouring in through the front door, and he is surrounded. In another scene, a group of angry neighbors travel by motorboat to voice their concerns about all these big cats that are around, and tigers jump in and sink the boats. And we watch men in the water fighting for their lives with real tigers. A few men's faces are covered in blood as they run for cover. Oh, what the hell is wrong with you? You only got a few scratches. That's what Noel yells at them. Noel never stops running around in this movie. He runs from one person screaming for help to another, all the time telling them to suck it up. It's clear that Noel Marshall is in an action-adventure comedy. Everyone else is in a horror movie. And make no mistake, Roar is a horror film. Nearly 2/3 of this movie involve Tippi Hedren and her children under siege in the house, getting chased and attacked by lions. But before all that carnage, we have a true horror movie setup. The family arrives on the land, and they see the house down in the valley. It is eerily quiet. The place is empty. Nothing moves. They walk towards the house. calling out for their father, and there's no answer. Their voices echo. The lions are hiding, and this family is walking into the area shouting. If they looked up, they'd see a leopard following them in the trees. They get to the house, and they open the front door, and the rooms are empty. Where are all the big cats? The kids walk around the house, shouting for their dad, and we flinch every time they pull open a door to another part of the house. Because we know that sooner or later, there's going to be a big surprise behind one of these doors. And when it does happen, it's shocking how intense the whole thing gets. During the entire siege, there is no dialogue except for screaming and shouting, and the soundtrack is nothing but tense jungle drums pounding with dread. And the pace is furious. The lions swarm the 3 stories of the house, and Tippi and the kids are on the run, trying to find a stronghold. The family barricade themselves behind doors, and the lions smash right through them. It gets more and more intense as more and more lions fill the house. It is truly a jaw-dropping experience. How in the hell is this a love letter to animal conservation? Now, let me be clear. The lions and tigers are not the monsters in this movie. They are just doing exactly what they do as territorial, untrained wild animals. The horror comes from watching people mess around with these animals, flagrantly ignoring any safety precautions, as if good intentions are going to make them invulnerable. I think the kids had good intentions. They just happened to be following the delusions of their father and their mother. And the delusion Noel and Tippi suffered from was thinking that any of this had anything to do with helping the animals. The obsession wasn't animal conservation or animal protection. That was the camouflage for the crazy. The obsession was ownership and domination, wildlife preservation on their terms and nobody else's. Noel, with his afro mane of hair, wanted to be the Lion King of the pride. The couple demanded to be let into the lion's world, like those animals owed them a private Eden because they gave them land to roam on. In L.A. County. Yeah, so about that. In 1978, in the middle of production, a dam broke and flooded the Marshall Ranch. 3 lions escaped the water by escaping the ranch and headed towards the town of Acton. Deputy sheriffs had to shoot the wild animals. One of them was Robbie, the Lion King. There's a scene in Roar where lions are shot by big game hunters. There's a close-up on a bloody, dead lion, and it looks real. I wonder, if Noel and his family's injuries made the final cut, did a dead lion make it too? Now, Roar has been called possibly the most dangerous movie ever made. Now, I want to talk about a documentary that is getting the reputation of being possibly the most dangerous documentary to talk about. The release of the documentary got the filmmakers and the people involved with it sued. A screening at a film festival needed to be stopped because there were private investigators secretly recording the film with hidden cameras in coffee cups. A Q&A session exploded into legal threats and warnings of criminal charges from documentary subjects that were sitting in the audience. And the director was served 2 lawsuits while answering questions at a meet and greet. What does this documentary discuss that makes it so dangerous to discuss? Well, it focuses on an unseen deity that watches everything. This deity is swift in judgment and punishment, and this documentary has incurred its wrath. Because the filmmakers talk about subjects which have been commanded not to be discussed. And they commit heresy by speaking the true name of this deity out loud. And those under subjection of this deity bring hell to the filmmakers' doorsteps. I know, it's a controversial topic. It's a touchy subject. Of course, I'm talking about the world of competitive endurance tickling. Come again, you may say? Believe it or not, there is a person at the center of David Farrier and Dylan Reeves' documentary Tickled that nobody sees and nobody knows their true name. Even the people who work for them, even their leg breakers, have never seen or spoken to this person, even on the phone. And this person destroys people's lives for their own gratification. And their weapon of choice is supplied by the victims themselves: shame. This person hides their predatory nature under the facade of the subculture of competitive endurance tickling. Is your head spinning yet? It's a feeling I got several times while I watched this documentary. I'm sure it's a feeling the documentarians had several times while making it. I did not see that coming. Why didn't I see that coming? Why? Because most of the time, crazy has the best camouflage. And this documentary is about a news of the weird style reporter who accidentally trips over the camouflage of a pathological predator. David Farrier is a reporter from New Zealand television, and while he's searching the web for new story ideas, he comes across a video for competitive endurance tickling. What the hell is that? So he clicks. In the video, there's two teams of teenage boys in athletic gear, and they're taking turns holding each other down and tickling each other to see who can last the longest. No nudity, no sex, just tickling. So Farrier finds out that this is a monthly event that's sponsored by an American business entity called Jane O'Brien Media. Young athletes across the world can apply online, and if they're picked, they get an all-expenses-paid trip to Los Angeles and $1,500 for participating. So Farrier contacts Jane O'Brien Media to see if they'd be interested in being the focus of one of his 2-minute pieces. This is a standard yes-no question, right? What he got instead as a response was this: to be brutally frank, association with a homosexual journalist is not something that we will embrace. We desperately do not want a homosexual participant base applying for this project. My concern is your journalistic style, your fan base, and reputation in your own country. So I guess that's a no. And I guess that's that then, right? Well, not so fast. A representative from Jane O'Brien Media continues to email more insults to Farrier for weeks. We recently read a Googled article about the knowledge of your living with a homosexual partner becoming quite a stir in New Zealand. Shame on you, little gay Kiwis. Faggot. These aggressive emails are coming directly from a business entity. A business entity that has teenage boys held down and tickled by each other. But of course, all of this aggressiveness, it's honey to a fly for a reporter, so Farrier starts to investigate. He finds that the Judy O'Brien website is the tip of an iceberg made from over 300 tickling-related domain names owned somewhere in Germany. He and his documentarian partner blogged about their discoveries, and the blog went viral. Since the story got so popular, Farrier and Reeve decided to do a documentary. And then things get dark and creepy fast. As they find a possible connection between competitive tickling and a potential tickling fetish empire, the wrath of an unseen and powerful figure rains down upon them. It starts as lawsuits. Then it's veiled threats by email. Then it's veiled threats in person from representatives of the business entity. Then it becomes just plain threats. A nonstop avalanche of threats by an unnamed and unknown ghost. The documentarians haven't stumbled upon an obsession. They have stumbled upon a predator's trap, and the predator has no problems defending its territory. This isn't obsessive. This is pathological. Okay, let me stop right here for a moment. Now, let me be clear. The obsession, The pathology is not about sexual preference or about any morality around sexual fetishes or kinks. Now, I know it's hard not to focus on something that may be so unique and foreign to you. But the tickling thing, it is merely a distraction. See, it might make you uncomfortable and you don't want to know anymore, so you turn away. Or even worse, you just find it all hilarious. It's just so silly, and you dismiss the entire thing. Tickling, don't be ridiculous. And that makes it a great hiding place for a monster. The obsession that this predator has turned pathological is no more about tickling than Roar was a love letter to animal conservation. The obsession is control and power and domination. This person wants to own people, to turn them into things, to make them helpless, to make them powerless. This person uses threats and intimidation and antagonism to get to the emotion that will make just about anyone submit: shame. So tell me, when I told you that there was a video where teenage boys tickled each other, where did your mind go? When I said that there was no nudity or sex, that it was just tickling, did that put your mind at ease? Maybe. Maybe not. Jane O'Brien Media wants you to think that it's just innocent tickling. But is the tickling still innocent when you pay teenagers to do it and you videotape it? What if I were to tell you that these teenage boys were bullied and intimidated when they decided they didn't want to do the videos anymore? What if I told you that when they did stop doing the videos, the ones they did do were posted on YouTube and any other video media site with their names included? And the description that went with these videos made the teenage boys into perverts, like the video poster was uncovering a shameful and dark secret. And then the videos were embedded in spam emails and appeared at the top of Google searches. What if I told you that a website with all the teenage boys' videos would suddenly appear online, and their personal information, including cell phone number, email address, and home address, were posted to that site? And then emails would be sent to high school coaches and potential college scouts that say, "Warning, sexual deviant." Would you still say that the responsible person's obsession was a tickling fetish? Is it any wonder that most of the teenagers were afraid to even speak to the documentarians? And this intimidation and abuse didn't stop at the teenage models. As Ferrier and Reeve follow some leads, they talk to people who have had run-ins with the entity that haunts the business entity. Their advice: get away as quickly as you can. You are in a dangerous position. Or, as one of the representatives of Jane O'Brien tells the documentarians in a face-to-face meeting, "Let me make a point here. If you want to stick your head in a blast furnace, do it." They do. And because they do, Tickled goes down some dark and twisted paths to get to some startling revelations. Tickled is a disturbing portrait of a rich and mysterious sociopath who gets off on forcing everyone into submission. Or a portrait of a rich, self-loathing fetishist who gets off on punishing other people for the very actions they wish to do. Or maybe it's both. And that's where the horror lies in Tickled. So let's get back to my analogy of going to a conference or a rally where you're surrounded by like-minded people who are all deeply invested in whatever it is you support. You are with your people, your fellow low-level obsessives who can celebrate their collective passion for something, for anything. For the most part, you are amongst friends. But remember, there are those that walk among you that use that passion as camouflage. They use that passion to hide a much deeper and darker obsession that needs to be fed. As you walk through that auditorium or hotel lobby, keep your eyes and your ears open. You might just catch a glimpse of how nature says, "Do not touch." Here, there be lions. And thanks for listening to my show. I'd love to hear back from you. You can email me directly at scott@hellbentforhorror.com. And I've also updated my Hellbent for Horror website, hellbentforhorror.com. You can download every episode directly from there, read any newsletters, and you can go to any of my social websites and emails all from the homepage. You can IM me on my Facebook page at facebook.com/hellbentforhorror, and you can find me on Twitter at hellbenthorror. A lot of the great conversations I have with fans happens on Twitter at hellbenthorror. Now, for you, the listeners of Hellbent for Horror, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/hellbentforhorror. If you like the show and you're curious about audiobooks, sign up for the service through Hellbent for Horror. It helps make this podcast sustainable for me. I thank you in advance. And thank you for listening, folks. Hellbent for Horror was written and broadcast by me, S.A. Bradley, and produced by me and Lisa Gorski. You can now subscribe to the Hellbent for Horror podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Player FM, and Stitcher. And if you like the show, please consider writing a review on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play. It really helps. Till next time, stay hellbent.